Hi everyone, Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett here. It's the first week of October. We're excited to have you here on today's episode of the Mayor's Table. We have Farmington City Manager Rob Mays. We're going to be talking about budget, the CARES Act, and what we can look forward to coming in to 2021. Everyone, Farmington Mayor Nate Duckett, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Mayor's Table. We're in October of 2020, 10 months into the year, and with me is my dear friend, City Manager of the City of Farmington, Rob Mays.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's
great to be here.
It's great that you joined us here as we're coming out towards the end of 2020.
It's hard to imagine it's already October.
I am blown away, actually. The seasons have changed. We've gone through a summer of COVID. Now we're moving into the fall of COVID. And when I think of 2020, it will always be the year of COVID. And who knows how much further that's going to extend. But it brings up important conversations that obviously we have and the council have in regards to how do we operate a city in the midst of a lot of the economic downturn we're seeing. How do we plan for a future where we're not quite sure what exactly is going to be allowed to be open, not open going into 2021. Obviously, we have an election coming up here in a month. I can't believe that. It's less than 30 days away. So a lot of things are up in the air, but your job as the manager of the city is to ensure that the daily operations, the things that are happening as far as keeping the streets cleaned and paved and the parks mowed and police and fire and all those things that you do in your job, which is very complex, by the way, you have to make sure those things get done under a budget. So I wanted to spend some time today with you, talk a little bit about the planning of the budget for fiscal year 2021, which actually started in July, and how we're kind of planning and working our way through the next 12-month period. Want to talk a little bit about the CARES Act and the funding that we've received from the state and how we're kind of working on that at this point, and then updates on any city facility openings, kind of how we're trying to work back into some regular flow, so long as we keep COVID under control.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the budget.
Okay, well, you mentioned the year of COVID, and there have been a lot of challenges, but I think for the most part, the demands on the city, only increased during those challenges as people had demands and needs. Of course, early on in the year, the focus was really on our first responders and responding and to the crisis as it unfolded. And now as we're hopefully moving towards more of a resolution and towards normalcy, we're getting back to normal. Most of our facilities are operating from basically normal to some modifications, with the exception of the Civic Center. It's pretty much closed down. There are a few exempt groups that are allowed to do some training in large rooms there where we can have plenty of social distancing, but obviously all the performing arts and those things are closed down, which is a real disappointment. Our new facility and our new director and all the momentum that was building. Our indoor pools are open for lap swimming, but it's minimal, the usage in some exercise classes. Library's open. Again, no chairs yet to sit down in, with the exception of we're starting to get the computers back on. Fortunately, we lost an entire season of our new Brookside Bay water park, and that was certainly a big disappointment, but we made some modifications at the lake that I received so many positive comments about people that appreciated that we opened that up even broader for people to be out there on their own and get a break. So COVID certainly became the focus and shaped our budget preparation. And I guess what I would say is we sit here now, as you mentioned, we're 3 months into this fiscal year. It was entirely during the worst of COVID that we were planning the budget last spring. So we took a very conservative approach in our budget. We actually projected a loss of gross receipts tax of 20%. And the best thing I can say right now, although it sounds funny, is that the best thing I can say is it's not as bad as we had expected 3 months into the year. And we still don't have a crystal ball about the next 3 months or the next 9 months, but we had projected a budget that we could manage if we lost 20% of our revenue, kind of a catastrophic type of, view. And as we sit here today, the first quarter completed, we're only down 8% from a year ago.
Well,
But that's significant.
Well, it's very significant, and I think it's interesting, too, when you look at the breakdown of the gross receipts tax, kind of the different categories that go into that, and people would be interested to know, in regards to mining, oil and gas, construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade, retail, these are all the different categories that those gross receipts tax fall into. As through the second month, this is only through August, retail trade is up 10%. For year to date, which is pretty impressive in my mind. And the other thing, construction is up 35%.
Yeah, there's always some surprises.
So, and I've talked to folks around town who work for lumber stores, construction shops, and they've said that construction has just been through the roof, which we've actually seen in the prices for some construction materials that have doubled over the last 6 months. So,
Yeah.
pretty interesting time in regards to that. But continue.
Well, we've never been great at predicting, so it's just become even more, more volatile. And
Well, I think if you look back at the meetings we had in discussing what the budget was going to look like, of course, I felt that 20% was deep, but you made a very valid point that we can adjust at any given time. If we're not hitting 20%, we're doing better. We're always allocating those funds where that priority was needed, based upon the department needs and the city needs. What I think is great for the community to understand is even in the midst of a plan of a 20% deficit, the services that the people of the community would see would still be minimal. You would see very minimal impact citywide to the services that we pride ourselves in. We talk at times, the need to scale back government, when the reality is so much of the call for more services is that people want more of it, even though they say they don't. But we have a high quality of life, a high standard of life here in the city that I'm very proud of, and even had a conversation today with somebody who moved here a year ago, moved here from Denver, and they made the statement to me that, I had people saying, oh, you're moving in the wrong direction. And he's like, no, this is exactly the right direction. He believes, like I do, that New Mexico and Farmington in general is prime for investment and to become the next hot spot here in the United States for just the beautiful outdoor activities that we have, the 300 days of sunshine, the low tax environment. All those things are going to play in our favor. So we're going to see this swing back.
well, we all know what we have here in Farmington, the people that live here. Sometimes we struggle with getting that message out to the rest of the nation because, when you research Farmington, most often the data that pops up is the Farmington MSA. We talk about it a lot, a federal population designation, which is all of San Juan County, including very large, vast areas of the undeveloped areas of the Navajo Nation. It's over 1,700 square miles. And so anytime you're trying to compare data that's that broad, it's just not very accurate. So we always encourage people, come really understand Farmington and what it's like to live here, and obviously with our outdoor rec, our quality of life, our weather, and frankly, the economy holding in there pretty good in considering what we're facing.
Yeah, pretty impressive, actually. And if you're watching from another state and you're considering relocation, I tell people to go to the farmingtonnm.org website. We have just great photographs, and you can understand a little bit more about what our community has and how it may fit into your life. So
yeah, check with the local resources.
Yes.
Our Convention and Visitors Bureau, our Chamber of Commerce, the people that are here that can really tell you what the real true story is. But I think back to the challenges of people's expectations in the budget. Our services are intact, but they've been cut a lot. So to balance a budget that we were projecting over a $10 million loss of revenue, or 20% of our tax revenue, the two big places that we've cut are personnel and capital investment, and so. The capital investment side, most of our citizens won't notice. The personnel side, they will, if in terms of some things aren't getting done quite as fast as they used to. When people have a need, they want it right now. If they're going to complain about a neighbor's weeds, they want somebody there, right now, or a barking dog or whatever.
or a pothole.
Or a pothole. Virtually all of our departments are down personnel. I mean, to put that in perspective, we reduced over 27 full-time employees, and over 44 part-time equivalents converted to 40 hours. It was actually over 200 people, bodies. So the grand total was 71 less full-time employees working for the city this year than a year ago. And to put that in perspective, it's interesting to kind of do the math. That's 147,000 man-hours a year, or 405 every day. So the team that serves our citizens, we have 405 less working hours every single day, 7 days a week, to accomplish the expectations of the public. So what we're telling people is we're going to maintain our quality, but maybe sometimes we just want to manage expectations a little bit, that with this kind of a budget cut, and we may not be able to get there or do it quite as quick.
One of the areas that a lot of people have been talking about throughout this year, in the midst of a lot of upheaval and some turmoil in cities throughout America, was the defunding of the police department. And we talk about city services and putting a budget together where we're losing over 400 hours a day. Defunding the police was not one of those scenarios that the council, I think, was willing to look at, and frankly, we didn't, because we've done a lot of police reform here locally, and we've talked about that on the show with Chief Hebby. But it would be interesting for folks to know that in the month of July, we had 7,400 calls for service for our police department. This isn't the county sheriff. This is just Farmington PD. And if you look at all the different types of calls that our police officers are required to respond to, it can be almost overwhelming. I mean, I think it's like 235 calls a day. And you got to think during those heavier call times, we're not talking it's an average over the whole 24 hours. It can be very strenuous. And then you get to the month of August, and it was 6,800 calls. So that's a lot putting on a police department that is out there dealing with everything from crime, every sort of crime you could possibly think of.
Yeah, per capita, I think it's still factually true. I believe we're the busiest police department in the state per capita. Of course, again, it's like everything else, the benchmarks we just talked about. The city of Farmington is nothing like a city of 45,000 people. Any given day, our daytime population is estimated at over 100,000. Over 300,000 people come from the entire MSA to come here to go shopping. So all of our services, whether there be our quality of life services, Parks and Rec, and all those factors, and obviously our public safety, are really geared up to manage a much larger population. And that's a good and bad thing, mostly good. But it comes with its challenges, too, to be the big city in a region of over 300,000 people.
No, you're right. The fire department for the month of August, 1,100 calls for service. Month of July was 1,200, almost 1,300 calls.
And you see the exact same type of benchmarking data when it comes to our park usage, our library, our swimming pools, our lake. People come from all over because this is a great place to be, and they come in and shop and spend some time here while they're here.
Well, it's certainly one of the reasons why I've appreciated the job that we have. We have such a great city staff, great department heads and leaders in this community. They're truly dedicated to creating that positive environment for people from all over to use. And I think that's something that maybe doesn't get reiterated enough. And for all of us here who live inside the city of Farmington, a lot of times we just think about, well, this is our city. Well, really, this city expands to cover that area that has over 300,000 people in it. So, very valid point. So we started with the 20% plan of decrease in gross receipts tax, and then right now we're down to 8, so we're hanging in there.
But I just want to again point out how challenging that is. I was talking with Dr. Schmidt from the schools this week, and just mentioned that they're concerned about the potential of a 5% cut, or what percent cut will the state have to their budget. People need to understand ours has already been cut 8. Where we sit here today, because that's the revenues that come in are what they are. And so it's significant, and we're managing pretty large numbers. Hopefully we've found that bottom, and we'll settle on. But I still think that planning conservatively was the way to go. Like you said, we can always add back things. Government's easy, it's easy to spend money. I think if we continue to do a little better than we planned for, towards mid-year, we'll start thinking about some of the major one-time non-recurring expenditures that we can invest in. Police cars and some roofs and buildings and some of the things that don't build back into the recurring side of the budget. We're going to move very slow to hire back these positions because, again, recurring expenses aren't just a one-time. And so we'll focus on some of those things first. So even as we ease out of this, if things get better, we'll still do it in a conservative manner that keeps our options open. And as we've always managed that way, and our elected officials and our administrative staff, we're in 11 years now of essentially austerity. So it's really all we know is managing in that type of environment.
Well, in 2008, I mean, in that year, we lost roughly 25% gross receipts tax that
At
year.
one point during the year, it landed at about 18%. But yeah, the tax base today is still about 25% below what it was then, in terms of. So it's remarkable, really, if you want to compare back to where things were at the high point in 2009, it's apples and oranges. This organization and how it operates.
Very interesting. Even with those challenges, and I think it's always important, no matter if you run a business or you're planning for your own home budget, you're planning for the things that you need to take care of and you have to take care of, but you always should be looking forward to things and what is the next step for us. And the city of Farmington made some very bold moves a few years ago that has now accumulated into projects like Brookside Bay, Water Park, and our downtown project specifically. Downtown project, Rob, how's it going?
It's going good, and to your point, that's one of the most remarkable things. With 12 years of austerity, from a budget and tax standpoint, we've still moved forward with big improvements that will have a lasting effect for generations to come. Downtown projects going great. I mean, phase 1 has been open now for since June. Phase 2 is on schedule, and we should be opening here late fall, early November. Then, depending on weather, we may start to get the plants up and all those things that will really take it to the next level. But it's continue. We're already seeing a lot of interest in businesses down there that as a result of that. So,
Sure.
Yeah.
I think we'll see I don't want to call it an explosion, but I'm certainly optimistic because there has been a lot of chatter.
Yeah,
from
people looking
individuals.
at property and
Right.
business ideas we're hearing about that people are talking about.
And that's what we're trying to create, is that place where no matter your age, no matter who you are, you find a place there that this speaks to you and you want to make it your own. And obviously the hope is that individuals who are passionate about something find that downtown area to make it a home for their business and for the passage that they want to drive their lives. So I'm excited. Crossing my fingers, hoping for the end of October we see the final pavement go on that phase 2. Yep. But that's just going to move us into other things that we're doing throughout the city, as far as road improvements or river trails or improvements out at the lake. We just completed a full, the road around the lake. We've just completed a chip seal there, so that was a really important component of.
Yeah, really to manage the traffic.
Yes.
We just, not only was the road not in good shape, it couldn't handle the traffic. We had traffic jams up there. So, yeah, continuous improvement. That's a very high priority because the people are speaking, right? They're using it, and so that. And you mentioned the trails. Though we've had to slow down a little bit this year with some of the things we were planning to do, but we hope to get back on track with discussions of the public-private partnership on the aerial adventures up there. People forget that's still a real feasible possibility.
Sure.
We're really cool project. We're conducting a study on. We're trying to look for that low-hanging fruit, as we always say, but to put in some. You can help me describe it, but some water features more water features in the lake that will bring about rafting and those kinds of things. Even that surfing,
surfing on the river,
surfing and that stuff. Surprisingly, it's I'm going to say cheap. Nothing's cheap, but it's surprisingly inexpensive for the payoff. Because the river's already there, right? And so what we're doing is taking advantage of it by adding features and accessibility and casting a vision, and people come.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do is we want to be fishers of men, so to speak, because we're trying to attract people here to the area, and for all of our friends around this region that come on the weekend and maybe go shopping, trying to give them some more incentive to stay longer and explore these areas that we believe just add to that quality of life that we enjoy here. So we're excited to continue to see that. And there's broad visions for all sorts of ideas and plans for where we move next into some of these realms. But we appreciate all the feedback that we get here from our community, and a lot of great ideas have come from individuals reaching out to elected officials, and we appreciate that. Looking at the additional funds that have been kind of brought down, for the CARES Act. I want to talk a little bit about that just to give our community an update on how that process is working. The CARES Act funding went to the state. The state then put forth a plan, an application process for cities and counties. Criteria that they had to meet. Cities and counties apply for funding, and there was a couple different components to that funding, and I wanted you to talk a bit about that.
Well, one side of it, the CARES general funding is more towards COVID response, first responders, different things the city has done in order to respond directly to the crisis. The second half of the CARES funding was the business continuity relief grants on the business side, small businesses, and that's where that's what we get the most questions about, that people are obviously the most interested about. If you go to the city's webpage, fmtn.org, it pops up a giant, it's not a little button, it's a very big button, business relief. Just click on that. The application's there, all the criteria. But in general, it's for small businesses. Businesses have to be under 50 employees and under $2 million of revenue. So it's there's a lot of businesses that don't qualify that certainly, I'm sure, could use it. We've had 148 applications to date. I was just told this morning that we feel pretty confident that the vast majority, probably 90+%, will qualify.
That's good.
And in other words, they met the criteria. But what we're telling people, if in doubt, just apply. Or call City Hall and talk to somebody, because our goal is to interpret the rules certainly accurately, authentically, honestly, but interpret the rules in favor of our businesses and try to get this money awarded. It's very possible that all the money that's available statewide won't get awarded because the criteria that was put out by the state is restrictive enough. And so whether there'll be a second round allowing us to open up the criteria, it's all speculation at this point.
But it is important for folks to know there was some very strict criteria that the city has to abide by when we're accepting these applications. And the way that the money worked, and the way it works really, is we have put out the applications to local businesses. They apply through us. We grant them the money, and then we go to the state to be reimbursed from the state.
That's
Is that correct?
That's a reimbursement grant.
So the state didn't just give us a clump of money and say, here, distribute this.
There's an amount allocated for us to use.
Right.
And it looks like it's going to be ample to cover all the applications that we get.
We saw in the Albuquerque Journal, I believe, just a brief story that the state, they had $400 million that they set aside for small business loans. Now, what we're dealing with here, the CARES Act, is grants. Now, there's still stipulations. You still have to prove that you're using the money and handling any type of loss of revenue that surrounds COVID. But the state's looking at the $400 million that they've done for loans, and they're not getting a lot of applicants for that money. And I think some of it has to do with the fact that businesses don't want to take on more debt. Talked to a number of business owners here in our city, and the amount of debt that they've taken on in these last 6 months is extraneous. It is what it is. And even though these grants are limited to a $5,000 and a $10,000 max, depending on the number of employees you have, I do recommend that people apply for it. If it's questionable whether or not, go ahead and apply for it anyway. My hope is that they will open it up a little bit broader, and we'll be able to get that money out as fast as possible. We don't use we can't use the money.
No, we can't.
We simply just want to be the pass through.
It'll go back to the state if we can't give it out. So we're certainly lobbying for that if the money can't be spent, that they broaden help us get it out there. But it's obviously we could talk all day philosophically about it. Money, the government handing out money isn't what the private sector needs. The private sector needs the government to get out of its way and let our businesses do what they do best. And
that is the one thing that always stays in my mind in the conversations that I see happening at the state level, is there appears to be just more of this, we need more federal money to help us deal with our problems, when in fact there's a lot that we could be doing here in the state of New Mexico and getting businesses open that will help them and everybody deal with this problem.
Yeah. Like I said, we're both telling people you might as well apply for it, but we totally understand the frustration of our business owners. Just we don't want a $5,000 or $10,000 grant. We want to do what we do.
Right.
And be allowed to be successful. And so we're sure rooting for our businesses, that's for sure. And we've certainly tried at the local level to do all we can to provide as much freedom and opportunity for our local private sector to be successful in spite of the challenges of the regulations and challenges that we're dealing with.
we're only a few months out from, the 2021 session in Santa Fe. As things sit right now, what are a couple things that you would like, you would like to see happen, or you would be telling our local legislative body, things that you would like to see happen in Santa Fe?
Well, in the broad philosophical level, and again, this is not a partisan statement regarding a Democrat or Republican governor. You and I have discussed the fact that this COVID exposed the fact that the laws of the state of New Mexico vest an unbridled, unaccountable amount of power into the office of the executive, regardless of which side of the aisle. Our belief is that type of emergency powers should be broad, but there should be a time frame, whether it's 30, 90 days, where the legislative branch has to weigh in. That's how it is in the city of Farmington. You and I both hold executive powers as a part of our ordinance. We can implement some very significant regulations, but the city council has, in 72 hours, has to decide whether we acted reasonably or not.
Right.
And that's a balance of power, and that doesn't exist in the New Mexico. So that would be a broad law that I would love to see really looked at. I would love to see, first and foremost, that the state do no more harm. Year after year, they've made changes in laws that make it more difficult for local government. From a capital investment standpoint, I don't know that there's going to be any probably capital outlay money, but any funding towards our railroad project is top priority. There's momentum in that project now. I mean, it's been talked about for as long as I can remember, and long before I worked for the city. But I will tell you right now, there's more momentum than at any point to possibly have a breakthrough about getting a railroad. So those are some of the big ones. We haven't gotten real deep into thinking about what kinds of things we would lobby for, but mostly get out of the way of the private sector and let the private sector be successful.
No, I think you surmised that very well. The checks and balances component to me, essentially throughout this emergency, all municipalities and counties have lost their voice in Santa Fe.
That's right.
And the reason we've elected state leaders to go to Santa Fe is to be their representative of our feelings and our beliefs and things that we believe are important. And throughout this entire year, those voices have been muted. So that was also my top item that I provided to House Speaker Egoff in a conversation with him. And certainly I've not heard any pushback from that idea, but we'll see what happens here come January.
It ought to be a common sense principle that no governor, regardless of political affiliation, should be intimidated by it. We ought to all want that type of transparency. But like you said, our local constituents have been extremely frustrated. They call up and say, "Mayor, can't you do anything?" We say, "No, it's the state jurisdiction. There's nothing we can do." They call their local elected representatives, state level. They have to say, "No, there's absolutely nothing we can do." Even the legislature has absolutely no power. It's entirely vested in the executive, and in fact, the Supreme Court has ruled that all of the actions done were in fact lawful. So other states have more balanced powers. Again, you need to vest very, very broad emergency powers in the executive so you can act quickly,
Sure,
outside of bureaucracy. But there's got to be a limited time frame that the people have their voice, their representatives, to have it reviewed and have it checked.
And I would think with the amount of pressure that's placed on governors, that it would be in their mind, you know what, it would be nice if I had the voices of my colleagues with me in this, and so that we are truly together in dealing with these emergency situations. So, Mr. Mays, what else you want to update our community on?
Nothing comes to mind at this moment. I'm sure as soon as we get off the air, we'll think of something.
Well, there's certainly a lot going on, and I just continue to advise people to continue to be optimistic.
Yeah.
So much in our lives is our blessings, and a lot of times we lose focus on those things. Just to take a moment to reflect on the good things that you have going on. Thanksgiving's coming up here at the end of this month. We're not sure what Halloween's going to look like. I'm not sure what Thanksgiving is going to look like, but there's a lot that I have to be thankful for here in my community and within my family, and just very appreciative of your leadership here in the city. And I do want to make sure I do a shout out somebody else I'm very thankful for, and that's Greg Allen, Executive Director of San Juan Safe Communities. This is the San Juan Safe Communities studio now.
Yep.
That Greg has put together for us to film. So we just appreciate all the hard work that Greg does in helping us create this, this community conversation that we can have every other week. So thank you, Greg. I don't have anything else today.
Well, thank you also, Mr. Mayor. This has been a really challenging time to be mayor and to our city councilors with so many challenges, and you've done an outstanding job, and it's an honor to work with you and for you and the rest of the city council.
No, I'm very appreciative of that, and just appreciative of this community and the way that they have held it together during this time. I think it speaks volumes, really, to the character of the people of Farmington and their hearts and what they want to see happen in their community. They've made this happen over these past few months, and we're going to keep pushing through it. So
yeah, and people have stayed civil for the most part with each other during very difficult national narrative, and as we approach the election, we want to continue to encourage our people to be civil to each other regardless of their beliefs, and keep our community first.
That's right. Well, thank you for being a part of our community. We appreciate you tuning in today to the Mayor's Table. If you're not from the city of Farmington, again, I advise you go to farmingtonnm.org. A lot of great information about the things that are important to us here locally and how maybe it can fit into your life. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you here next time on the Mayor's Table.